Hello, everybody, and my name is Dr. Nashana Holmes, and I'm going to be hosting some podcasts that really gears leaders towards leading with clarity. Now, before I even get into the workshop, let me explain a little bit about the type of work that I'm really passionate about. As a doctor, my focus is on character centered leadership development. Now, I went to school for organizational leadership, and I've noticed a lot of things, even as I was studying all the things that organizations need, all the things that leaders need to make them more effective in the work that they do. But I noticed one thing in my research. I noticed that a lot of the problems really doesn't have to do with leadership competency. It has a lot to do with leadership character. For this reason, I went on and my passion has become character centered leadership development. Now, let me explain a little bit about what this is about. It's an approach to leadership growth that focuses on developing the internal qualities, values, self awareness of the leader before focusing only on external skills and strategies. We have to really pay attention that effective leadership is not so much about what a leader does. It actually begins with who a leader is becoming. That's where my work comes in, right? When we think about leadership, right, it's an outward expression, but is really based on inward foundation. So a lot of the leaders that we encounter, even though we don't pay attention to it, whether they're good or bad, it all starts inward, right? So this brought me to the idea of making sure that everyone knows before you even become, this corporate leader that you want to become, or this big famous, even YouTube or a content creator, your character is going to drive every decision, every relationship, your way of communicating, your sense of accountability, and the culture you create. So my job is to come in and for us to focus specifically on character-centered leadership, right? So if we look at the foundation of character-centered leadership, many leadership programs really focus on strategy, they focus on communication techniques, goal setting, management skills, and performance outcomes, right? And this is important. I'm not saying any of that is not important, it is. But character centered leadership takes it a step further. It asks deeper questions, right? What are my internal qualities that I have that help me to lead effectively? Now let's think about that. In your last professional development, has anyone ever talked to you about you? It's usually it's always about the outcomes, what we need to do better, what we're doing well, right? But we don't start at the core of the person who is the leader, right? We have to remember that leaders, their beliefs influence how they think, right? And then think about that. Their thinking influences their choices, and then their choices influences their behaviors, and then behaviors influence results. So this is why it's important that we really sit back and think of character-centered leadership, right? So throughout the different episodes that I post, we're really going to be digging into one topic. And we're going to really make sure that this topic helps us to build some self awareness, right? To be able to see ourselves clearly, to be able to understand how we show up as leaders. These topics are also going to build on our integrity, right? How do we align our values and actions to what we do and how we lead, right? What does that look like? How does my actions reflect the values that I expect others to follow? And then all of our sessions are really going to be pulling on emotional intelligence. Without emotional intelligence, it is impossible to lead, right? You have to be able to lead yourself before you lead others. Okay, so I just wanted to give you a little bit of background and the type of work that I'm so passionate about. So, our first topic for today, we're going to talk about why great leaders still have blind spots. Let's take a moment to think for a minute, right? Now, when we think about blind spots, a blind spot is just like a specific behavior or assumptions that others can see clearly, but you do not see. Right? That's why it's called a blind spot, right? It's where our thinking, behavior, and character influences how we lead, but it's difficult for us to be able to recognize that in ourselves. And honestly, as a human, even outside of leadership, We all have blind spots. What makes it more dangerous in leadership is that if you are not aware of your blind spots, right? That blind spot is like the gap between your intention and your impact, right? Right. So meaning that a leader may have good intentions, but the unseen patterns, the unintended consequences that their team gets, right? Or even the unintended relationships or even just the things that you do as a leader that you don't recognize that you do, right? You really don't. Majority of the time, I always like to call this, it's this thing called the leadership iceberg model, right? And the whole point of the model is to show you what above water looks like and below water looks like, right? And if you attend an in-person session, you will see this diagram more in depth, right? So I'll do my best to explain it. When we say above water, right, these are the things that people can see. These are the things that those who work under you are able to see. They're able to see your decisions. They're able to see your communications. They're able to see your behavior. Now, in this iceberg model, there's also a below water category. These are the things that no one gets to see but you, right? Your beliefs, your fears, your needs, your experiences, your identity. Now, if as a team member, I'm only able to see your above water behavior, your decisions, communication, and behavior, and I never really get to see your below water behavior, then that means that you have to be aware of your below water behavior. You have to be aware of what goes on in those hidden parts. Right. So if I think about above water behavior, decisions, right? Decisions are the choices we make, right? Communication are the words we speak and how we express ourselves, and behavior is our actions, reactions, and habits. These are only the tip of the iceberg, right? But those deeper elements influence everything above the surface. So your beliefs affect your decisions. Your fears affects your decisions. Your needs affect your decisions. Your experiences affect your decisions, and your identity affects your decisions. Now, again, remember, all of these things that are going on below water, we don't know. Your team doesn't know. And if you don't know what's going on below water, then it's hard for you to really know what your blind spots are. And that's the danger, right? If you're not aware of what is going on within you as you are leading, then it's hard for you to make sure that it doesn't affect your above water activity, right? So when we talk about blind spots, right, we have to really, 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 really see that blind spots affect everything. They impact everything. Everything that you do, blind spots affect. Now, why do blind spots exist? Think about it. If we really look at it, and I'm not going to even go because I'm not a science teacher, so I'm not going to get into science. But if we think about the beauty of our brains really rely on habits, past experiences, and biases to make quick decisions all the time, right? Our brains are designed in that way to help us to make decisions efficiently. Now, because we encounter so much information, think about all the information that our brains just encounter. Our brains do this thing where they create mental shortcuts, right? They build their own habits, past experiences, biases, and they put all of that together to help us to be able to make a decision or to give a response, right? So if we're saying that our brains rely on habits, right? And our brains rely on past experiences and our brains rely on biases, then we have to make sure that we understand how each of those affect us, right? Now, think about it. It's so easy to develop a habit, right? Think about it. A leader who has developed a habit, right? Where, say, for example, they immediately have to solve problems, right? Automatically. There's no thinking. That's the habit that I perform. Is that beneficial in every situation? No, it's not. right? There are some situations in which a leader may need more time to be able to work through that. But if I don't notice that that's my blind spot, then my habit is going to continue to be detrimental to the teams that I lead, right? Think about past experiences. And we all have it. The brain uses history to predict the future. It just does. Okay. Our brain has this way of using previous experiences as a reference point for interpreting new situations. Right. And honestly, that's the beauty of our brains, right? It just helps us to be able to recognize patterns and make faster decisions. Right. But if a leader is not really aware of a past experience that may not be beneficial or may not even apply to a new situation, that may be a blind spot, right? That they have, right? Oh, I've seen this before. I know what happened last time, right? That's just a natural thing that our brain does, right? Now, I'm not saying that all past experiences are negative. Some of them can provide wisdom, right? But they can also limit, right? When we assume that the past will constantly repeat itself, right? And then blind spots also exist because of biases, right? The brain's mental filters, right? And we all have biases, right? Biases are unconscious assumptions or preferences that influence how we interpret people, situations, and information, right? So they develop from our experiences, from our culture, from our environment, right? You can't avoid a bias. You just really, really cannot avoid a bias. It's just something that we naturally have, right? So these three things are the reason why blind spots exist, right? Because our brains rely on our habits, past experiences, and biases to help us make quick decisions, right? So this is the leader's job to do extra work now, right? Since we know that there's really nothing naturally that we can do to avoid biases, there should be some type of system that we put into place to help us think through things, right? Right, some type of leadership thinking cycle, right? How we think as leaders, we look at our internal thinking patterns and see how it shapes our actions, see how it shapes our leadership style, right? And even ultimately shapes the outcomes, right? We should be having those moments where we're doing that internal thinking, right? Where you're thinking about your experiences. You're looking at, okay, how have my experiences shaped how I lead? How is my belief shape how I lead? How is my habits shaped as how I lead? How is my behaviors shape how I lead? And then what is the result of all of that? Right? If we don't do our thinking, if think about it, leaders, if we don't take the time to think through this, then even though you may think you're effective, majority of the times you're not. People are just functioning. We have to realize, okay, a lot of leaders or a lot of teams who are working under the most dysfunctional leaders, right? And it seems like they're having outcomes and they're doing everything on paper, but they're internally damaging their teams. The average person is not going to leave the job if it's good money. Okay. This economy is very difficult to live in, and everyone is trying to make it. Everyone is trying to stay afloat. So it's your job as a leader to make sure that you do your work, right? It's our job to do our work. We have to do our internal work. We have to make sure that we try our best to perform at the highest level of emotional intelligence that we can. Is there a perfect leader? No, there's not. But there is a lazy leader, right? And we don't want to be lazy leaders because we want to make sure that everything we do transforms those who are underneath us, right? We want to be transformative. So, really quickly, before we even end this discussion, I want to expose you to 5 common blind spots that leaders usually have. And I really want you to listen to each of them, and I want you to reflect. Even after this video, take some time and reflect and think about, do you have these blind spots? And if you do, how can you fix them? This is an ongoing thing. This is not something you're going to change overnight. Remember, habits take forever to develop, right? They usually say it takes 21 days for a habit to develop, right? So it takes a little while. So it's going to be work. But the first step is to just be aware, right? To be aware of your blind spot, right? So blind spot number one, the need to be right. Now, here's the thing, confidence is good. It is good. You have to be a confident leader. But constant correctness closes the door for growth. So if you are always right, then how do you grow? And if we're saying we're all humans and we've all experiencing this thing called life the same, then why don't you need to grow? Right? As a leader, you can never prioritize being correct over being curious, right? It's that need to always have the right answer and the difficulty in admitting mistakes or considering other perspectives. The whole point of you as a lead is not to know everything, right? And to do everything and to be everything. Your whole point is to realize that you are human, you are not certain, and you need to be curious and to seeing your impact on others, right? So, what does this blind spot looks like, right? Interrupting others. If you reject ideas too quickly, if you defend your decisions, whether right or wrong, right? If you rarely admit mistakes, there's nothing wrong with saying, I got it wrong. If I can drop mic there, I would drop it there, I guess. But there's nothing wrong with saying, I got it wrong. Honestly, believe it or not, those you lead know you got it wrong. They might not be brave enough to tell you you got it wrong, but they know you got it wrong. But you know how powerful it is to admit that you got it wrong? And it's okay, right? Do you know what that does to your team? It lets them know that there's no such thing as perfection and it's okay to try again, right? It's okay to try again. Think about it. If you notice in you needing to be right, that your team is not really innovated, right? They don't really share ideas, right? Honestly, they're showing you that they don't feel psychologically safe around you, right? And the big danger is no one is learning, right? When you get things wrong, that's a learning curve. It's open to reflection, right? Um, and really want you to think about this. Am I more committed to being right or to getting it right? The next common blind spot is micromanagement. Oh gosh. And I give you, I'll give you, I'll be transparent. That is one that I am still working through, right? And the reason why is that when you think through micromanagement, the word itself is like, oh, that's horrible, right? And majority of the times, leaders are taking control of situations because they don't feel safe, right? That's a whole nother discussion too, right? And honestly, control does feel safe. It makes you feel safe, right? But it really keeps others from growing. And that's horrible. The inability to release control is damaging. We have to be able, as leaders, to release control. Now, not saying everything's going to go perfect. It may go the very way that you think it will go, right? But our job is not to be so much focused on making sure everything is done perfectly. Our job is to make sure that we're all growing. And in growing, there are bumps. There are times where we will get it wrong. There are times where our teams will get it wrong. And it's okay. We should be able to digest that it's okay, right? Micromanaging really hinders trust, right? It really hinders trust. And those you are leading need to feel trusted. Think about you want to feel trusted, right? You want people to trust in your abilities, trust in what it is that you can do. And you have to make sure to understand that constantly checking on employees, no bueno. Give them a chance to fail if they're going to fail. Give them a chance to learn from their failure, right? Redoing others' work, not good, right? You're making every decision, right? Or even feeling anxious when work is done differently from the way you want to, right? It may cause you to micromanage. But think about what this does to your team. This builds frustration. This reduces creativity, right? This also gives low confidence, right? And honestly, you burn out fast, right? And majority of the time when you're micromanaging, when you burn out, your team feels it, right? So I want you to ask yourself, am I building capable leaders or am I building people who rely on me? That's probably another mic drop there too. Yeah, if I had the mic drop, I would do it. All right. Another common blind spot, avoiding difficult conversations. I think this is the blind spot that everyone have in general. I don't even think it's just refers to leaders, right? But when you think about it, what you avoid today, it really does create problems for the next day, right? And I'm not saying confrontation is the easiest thing. Confrontation is very hard. It requires a high level of maturity. It requires a high level of emotional intelligence as well, right? But you have to think of the damage of postponing or avoiding conversations, especially when it involves conflict, accountability, right? All of that uncomfortable feedback is needed, right? It's needed. Think about it. Think about the last thing you avoided. And think about if you really did what you wanted to do, how that would have impacted you. Courage creates clarity. You having courage creates clarity, right? And it also creates, let's think about it, comfortability, right? It lets your team and those you work with know, hey, I'm modeling for you how to deal with uncomfortable situations. Now, I'm not saying that every situation is going to go the way you want. It's called uncomfortable for a reason, right? But think of the bigger picture, right? Problems do not resolve themselves. They're not going to fix themselves. They're just not. Either you're going to resolve them or they're just going to start to go deeper and 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 deeper to maybe we don't see it anymore in the forefront, but it's still affecting everything that we lead, right? And then avoiding conflict also delays necessary decisions. We waste so much time putting these things in our brain, thinking that these certain outcomes are going to come, because you remember the beauty of the brain, right? Based on our habits and past experiences, we're using all that to avoid a conflict, and nothing's being fixed. Nothing's being fixed. And what's the impact of that? Resentment, right? Or even low standards. You ever been somewhere it's like, I'm going to do my job. I'm not going to do anything more. I'm not going to do anything less. It is what it is. I need my paycheck. I'm going home. That is a horrible way to think. And 9 times out of 10, the reason why your standards have been lowered is because conflict has been avoided somewhere. And this is in every organizational structure, right? We're not just talking about work with compensation. We can even talk about within churches, this happens where a lot of conflict is avoided. Oh, you know, after a while, let them deal with that on their own. After a while, it goes away. It does so much internal damage. And remember, internal damage is what goes on inside. And so many people are walking around with so much internal damage because leaders are only paying attention to external behaviors. Listen, as humans, we do a good job at, we know how to perform when needed. And I don't say that in a negative or positive way. We just do, right? But if leaders don't pay attention to that internal thing that's going on, there's lasting effects, right? So I want you to ask yourself, what difficult conversation am I avoiding that can really strengthen me as a leader and strengthen those that I lead? Because that's, even though it may seem like, all right, the conflict's over, believe me, it's going to manifest in a different way at a different time in a different season, the same conflict. So if you don't take time to strengthen and look at, always flip the negative to a positive, right? If there's conflict, doesn't mean that you're doing a bad job. You see everybody arguing, people don't like each other. It seems like people are talking about each other. Or that doesn't. Let's stop making this personal. People come with their own experiences. Your job as a leader is to shape new experiences for them. Right? So if you see that a lot in your leadership, don't take that 100% as evidence that you're doing something wrong. But you are doing something wrong if you don't confront it, because you're not helping strengthening, making those negative habits to positive habits. Another blind spot is emotional reactivity. I don't even think I would use a mic drop for that one. I think I would use like the mind blown part for that, right? It's when you react in the moment without thinking, just total, right? Where you let your emotions lead instead of allowing your values to drive your decisions and interactions, right? There's beauty in pausing, breathing, and responding. There's beauty in that, right? In leadership, right? There's going to be moments where, you're going to have to make immediate decisions. But in those times where you can pause, breathe, and respond, especially if you know that your initial response is coming from your emotions, you need to do that. You need to speak before thinking. No, you need to think before speaking. Goodness gracious. Think before speaking, right? If you notice that you're quick with speaking and you never give yourself a moment to think, this is the blind spot that you're dealing with, right? If you notice you raise your voice a lot, right? Or you notice that you make decisions while angry, that's dangerous. Never make a decision while angry. It takes a minute or two for you to regulate yourself. Here's the thing, as a leader, you're only responsible for yourself. Yes, you are responsible for the outcomes and stuff. What I mean by responsible for yourself is that you can only change what goes on inside of you. But the beauty in that, in you changing what goes on inside of you, it affects those around you, right? If they notice that you make decisions while you're angry, usually they're going to do the same thing, right? If they notice you become defensive when you're confronted about something, they're going to be very defensive. And defense hinders growth. See, if we would take all of the negative things that you may hear about your leaderships and you flip it, okay, if I am defensive, what is going on with me internally that's causing me to be defensive? Because usually, majority of the time, it has nothing to do with the person you're speaking to. The person you're speaking to, just help it manifest. But usually, it's something internal that's going on that caused this. And if you don't do your work and think about what's going on internally, then you're damaging those that you lead, right? Think about it. When you have a disagreement, do you take it personally, right? And that's a whole nother workshop by itself. What someone's saying versus what you hear. There we go with internal stuff again. Because all of that is based on what's going on internally, right? Now, the impact of emotional reactivity is that there's inconsistent decisions happening, right? Right? It lowers trust, right? Right? You're emotionally exhausted, right? It's tiring. Like, goodness gracious, I love, being a part of the team and I love working, but whew, it's exhausting. It's just too many emotions, right? And honestly, it reduces psychological safety, right? So one way I want you to think about this, right? Is my blind spot emotional reactivity? Think about, am I responding intentionally or reacting emotionally? Right? Intentionally, emotionally. Because believe me, even when emotions are high, you can still be very intentional in the way that you react. Very intentional. Is it hard? Yes, it is. I'm not saying that these blind spots are easy to overcome. What I'm saying is it's easier when you pay attention to what they are and that you are aware of what they are. Okay. And then the last blind spot is assuming intent, right? Assumptions should be nowhere in your leadership. You should never assume that people understand the posture of your heart. They may not. And then sometimes you making those assumptions are dangerous to your teams. Show them, right? Remember the diagram I showed you, the below water and above water? They don't know what's going on below water, but there are different things that you can do as a leader to show them your intent. But to assume it is dangerous, all right? You never, ever, ever should assume it. You should be very clear in what you do, and you should be very clear in your expectations, right? So, again, the 5 common blind spots that I really want you to think about and reflect on: need to be right, micromanagement, avoiding conflict, emotional reactivity, and assuming intent, right? So, I know we talked through a lot, and it can be kind of exhausting, especially when you see yourself in those places. But here's the beauty of it, right? Once you're exposed to something, now it's just your job to fix things, right? Do little things that you in your leadership that can help fix these patterns, right? So I want you to really sit back and think, what pattern keeps showing up in my leadership? Out of all the blind spots discussed today, out of all the things we discussed, right? And it could be anything. What do I see that keeps showing up in my leadership? And then what feedback have I ignored? Right? Feedback, it makes you vulnerable. It really does. It brings another level of vulnerability out of you. But feedback is powerful. Feedback is powerful. So as you go throughout the rest of your week and you're trying to decide, your blind spots, right? And you're paying attention to what it is that you do and how you show up as a leader in terms of your blind spots, remember, this is not to beat you down as a leader. This is for us. We want to lead with clarity. We want to be clear. Again, will we get it right all the time? No, we will not get it right all the time. But your job is to continue to discover yourself as you lead, right? Once you get that position, once you become that leader, you don't just become the manager, you are the influencer, right? And as the influencer, your job is to make sure that you do your internal work, right? Once I do my internal work, it will help me to lead with clarity, okay? Remember, here's my motto: you can't change what you won't confront. So keep leading with clarity, character, and purpose. Until next time, this is Dr. Nashana with Lead with Clarity. Speak to you soon.